Well, hello and welcome to Laird Wellness Live.
Good evening.
Special day, special time. Well,
Right.
7:30 regular time, but
Yeah. New day, new time.
new day. Yeah, we decided to do this on Thursday because we have something going on Friday night, so we thought that we'd try it on Thursday and see if y'all would like this day better. Let us know. You know, sometimes folks want to do a Shabbat, and that starts, earlier on Friday nights now that it's getting darker.
Yes.
So, we might try this night. Tell us if that works for you or not. You can respond in the comments and we will take note.
All right.
So tonight we want to talk about nitric oxide.
Mm-hmm.
Nitric oxide is the third gas involved in your respiration.
Mm-hmm.
You thought there was two, right? There's oxygen and carbon dioxide, and then there's nitric oxide. So nitric oxide is a very special molecule, and we're going to have a whole presentation on it. What I'm going to play for you is, instead of just talking about it tonight, I did a whole presentation on this at Passover 2020. So I have gathered that information, and we're going to play for you the bulk of it tonight. And it's about 33 minutes long, and so it's a very interesting presentation. I encourage you to watch it and take note. And there are several ways in your diet to get nitric oxide.
Right.
Now, vegetables are very rich in nitric oxide because as you chew nitrate-rich foods, it turns into nitrite. Now, I'm not talking about added nitrites into things like hot dogs and beef sticks and things like that, but we're talking about nitrates that are in vegetables. You chew them, and when mixed with your saliva, they turn into nitrites. Okay, and you swallow the nitrite and it makes nitric oxide. It has very, very important implications for your blood, which would explain why it provides energy. You notice that on the banner that we had for this thing tonight, we had a picture of a runner getting ready to run. And so that's what nitric oxide is all about, lots of big time energy. A way you can concentrate nitric oxide is with beet juice, and we have Beet Max that a lot of people get in order to do that. We also are getting another supplement
Product, yeah.
that we found at the Truth About Cancer conference. I called them today, and it turns out that we are actually on the ground floor of this.
Nice.
Yeah, they don't have any folks to really sell it for them yet. And I was surprised because I thought this thing was just the cat's meow when I first saw it several months ago advertised online. So this is an incredible thing. It's way beyond, beet juice. Now, if you want to do beet juice right now because there's nothing else out there, well, yeah, absolutely, it'll work. But this stuff apparently is just amazing.
Right.
And so we're going to carry that very soon. We're just filling out the paperwork to be doing that for you very soon. So what we're going to do right now, though, is we're going to present to you the nitric oxide presentation I called The Power of the Blood. So here we go, and we'll see you back here in about 30 minutes. Enjoy.
Now, usually the power of the blood is something we say in reference to Yeshua and has spiritual meaning. But as we know, the Bible has both spiritual and physical meaning. So I want to get into what the Bible has to say about your blood physically. So let's start there. Now, the Bible says the life of the flesh is in the blood. This comes from the Old Testament in Leviticus 17, verse 11. Now, here we're talking about sacrificial animals, but that sentence really has something to say about your blood as well as a human. This Bible verse refers to the sacrificial system, as I said, but it has implications for your own body, and quite literally. You see, the life of every cell in our flesh, that is, the oxygen provided to every cell, the oxygen that rides along with the hemoglobin, is indeed carried in our blood. If the heart stops pumping, well, we all know what happens. Oxygen cannot be transported to our tissues, literally our flesh, as Leviticus 17:11 points out. And if oxygen doesn't make it to our tissues, well, we die, right? So blood flow is necessary for life, and optimal blood flow is the key to health. Now, blood flow is the delivery system for almost every mechanism in the body, as you can imagine, from nutrient distribution to brain function, physical healing, and even waste disposal. I mean, it's to the point where I tell people that blood flow is everything, and if you come to me about health questions, I quite bluntly say, let's not even talk about getting healthy or reversing any symptoms of a condition you might have until healthy blood flow is established, because without that, we can't have health. Now, on the flip side, there is only death where there is no blood flow. As we talked about before, if blood flow stops, there's only death, right? If your heart stops, you're gone. 2 Chronicles 16 has something to say about this. It tells us about King Asa. Now, King Asa had developed a severe disease in his feet. The Bible doesn't tell us much more about that, but from what we get from the Bible text, we can deduct that it was poor blood flow to the extremities. That's what they would term as a disease in the feet. Now, verse 12 is specific about that. Chapter 16 says, "In the 39th year of his reign, Asa became diseased in his feet." His disease was severe, the Bible points out. But even in his disease, he did not seek the Lord, which is not wise, but instead he sought physicians. So Asa slept with his fathers, and we know what that means, having died in his 41st year of his reign. So, as we see here, as we do in many parts of Scripture, Jehovah wants us to seek Him for healing first, right? If we have something wrong with us, we're supposed to go to Him first. We're supposed to do that before running to the physicians. The woman with the issue of blood in the New Testament did the same thing with Yeshua. But what did she do? She did the same thing as King Asa. She spent all that she had on doctors before considering what the Almighty could do for her, specifically Yeshua. So getting back to Asa, he had this foot disease for 2 years, as we can deduct from the text, and then he succumbed to it. Some hypothesize that peripheral vascular disease was King Asa's problem, while others suggest it was simply diabetes, which could have led to gangrene in his feet. Well, either way, the disease in Asa's feet was due to poor circulation, poor blood flow. The power of his blood, the power needed to sustain Asa's life, could not get to its destination, down to his feet, down to his extremities, which is usually the first part of the body that suffers from poor blood flow. And what happened? Well, death ensued. So let's take this example and look at it a little more in depth. How does something as common today as diabetes, which some say that King Asa had, affect blood flow? How does that happen? And how does it affect the ability to even be healthy? Well, as we can see here, there is a root of disease. We have to get down to the basics, to the root of the problem, if you will. And that's exactly what blood flow is. Blood flow is the root of every aspect of our life. Every physical ailment, and even many mental ailments, which also depend on blood flow, have the same root cause, and that is poor blood flow, poor circulation that starves the body of what it needs. And that creates a domino effect that eventually leads to the symptoms by which we identify various diseases: cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes. So in the case of diabetes, for example, the high levels of glucose and fats in the blood are what cause the problem of diabetes. And you can imagine, just like molasses flows slower than water, the excess sugar slows down the blood. And I'm oversimplifying here, but in essence, it starves the body of the nutrients it needs. That's why diabetes is not just a disease on its own. It is a stepping stone. It's a warning sign to many other diseases like cancer, kidney failure, heart disease, blindness, and more. That one is kind of obvious. We often see that. But diabetes can lead to all of these things, all due to a part of the body dying, in essence, due to being starved of proper blood flow and all of the nutrients and all the other necessities that come with it. So how does diabetes do its damage? Well, the increased sugars and fats promote what we call oxidative stress. And it's just like oxidation on iron that we see on some patio furniture. It's like internal rust. Well, this creates too many free radicals, and I'll explain that in a minute, what free radicals are. But free radicals can, in turn, damage blood vessels. So you see where we're going here, kind of getting to the root of the problem, getting to the blood vessels themselves. And when you damage the blood vessels, you damage the road by which your blood travels. It's like the hose that your blood travels through. And that can lead to disaster if that's damaged. So is there a way to keep both the blood vessels and blood itself healthy and flowing along at optimal levels, not just at surviving levels, but at optimal levels? What can we do? Is there something we can do? Yes. The secret is the delicate interior lining of the blood vessels called the endothelial cells. Now, here we have a picture of the endothelial cells. You'll see the inner lining right here, right at the edge, right there, where the arrow is pointing. This is a single cell wall within your blood vessels. The endothelial cells, or endothelium, as they are called, are a single cell innermost lining of your blood vessels. They serve as the life jacket of the blood vessels, as Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn calls them. Who is Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn? Well, Dr. Esselstyn is a cardiologist who helps people reverse disease with diet. He'll operate on you if he has to, but he'd rather do it with diet because it is possible. He was actually the man who helped former President Bill Clinton reverse his heart disease with diet. Bill Clinton did not go to him about surgery, he went to him about diet. And that's how Bill Clinton turned his life around. He was also featured on various documentaries about the healing power of a whole food, plant-based diet. You might remember Forks Over Knives or the recent Athlete documentary. Now, when the endothelial cells are healthy and functioning properly as they should, they produce a gas called nitric oxide, which relaxes the blood vessels, which may help to decrease blood pressure because there's more room for the blood to go, right? And that will, of course, improve circulation. So by this action, this nitric oxide gas protects the blood vessels. So how can you keep your blood vessels healthy? Once you stop eating unhealthy foods that hinder your endothelial production of nitric oxide, the levels of nitric oxide can increase, of course, which can halt disease progression. And guess what? It can even reverse the symptoms altogether. So, what are the best nitric oxide foods? Good question. Whole grains, beans, legumes, greens, sweet potatoes, and fruit all have excellent sources of nitric oxide. It's all in the plants, go figure. Well, Dr. Esselstyn recommends eating these green leafy vegetables especially about 6 times a day. Yes, 6 times a day, not just once in the evening or once during lunch. And the strongest antioxidant foods available are the best. And of course, those are those dark green leafy vegetables. Chewing them, get this, not in a smoothie or juicing is best, chewing them. Because why? Well, it's very interesting. The action of chewing the nitrates in the greens mixes with the anaerobic bacteria on your tongue. And what that does is causes a chemical reaction that converts the nitrate in the plants to nitrite. Now, this is not the same nitrites you see, like sodium nitrite that you see in packaged meats and that type of thing. Those are dangerous. What we're talking about is nitrite coming from the nitrates in the vegetables. And that gastric acid in your stomach, when you swallow it, converts this to nitric oxide. So you see how that works. The nitrate goes to nitrite, and then to nitric oxide. And it matters how you prepare these green vegetables too. Of course, raw is just fine, but the best way is to prepare them by boiling or steaming about 5 to 6 minutes. That's the perfect ratio to make the nutrients more absorbable to your cells. Then what do? Well, then you add some balsamic vinegar. Why? This is also very interesting. The magic of chemistry is what takes over here. You see this acetic acid, the acetic acid in the balsamic vinegar specifically, has been shown to restore the nitric oxide synthase enzyme contained in the endothelial cells. And that is responsible for producing nitric oxide. Very interesting. Here's another thing the greens do. The greens also restore the ability of bone marrow to make endothelial progenitor cells. Basically, they spawn new endothelial cells to replace the worn out ones in your blood cell, in your linings of your arteries. So, increasing nitric oxide not only increases blood flow by widening the blood vessels, it also reduces the blood pressure, makes sense, right? And thereby reduces the progression of diseases that start with high blood pressure, because it's very much like diabetes. A lot of things start from high blood pressure. I mean, even the flu can become more severe with high blood pressure. Did you know that? Most people who die of the flu, as we saw earlier this year with the pandemic that started in China, that doesn't make people die in itself. The flu is not really what's doing it, because it's not the virus, but it's because the people's immune systems who get that virus are continually looking or their immune systems rather themselves are continually looking after other problems caused by underlying conditions. And because of these diseases, their bodies are unable to stop the relatively harmless effects of the flu, which then progress and big snowball effect until they overcome the body's ability to self-heal. Those problems start with high blood pressure, and that causes strain on other parts of the body. As you can imagine, the blood can't get through, and so other parts of the body end up strained, and eventually a piece of it dies, which we call disease. So this splinters the immune system's efforts even more. It's trying to put out all these fires all over the body and can't pay attention to keeping you healthy. So as you can see, life is truly in the blood. And the key to that life is nitric oxide, because nitric oxide works to carry oxygen to every part of your body. And without oxygen, there is no life. This is a relatively new finding. I mean, in fact, just a few years ago, a study overseen by cardiologist Dr. Jonathan Stamler found out that without nitric oxide that we've been talking about here to open the blood vessels, hemoglobin, which is your red blood cells, is unable to deliver oxygen to the tissues because oxygen rides along with the hemoglobin. In fact, Dr. Stamler said that blood flow to tissues is actually more important in most circumstances than how much oxygen is carried by the hemoglobin. So the respiratory cycle is actually a 3-gas system. That's a quote from Dr. Stamler. Now previously, the respiratory cycle was seen as a 2-gas system, right? I mean, that's how we all understood it in school. You breathe oxygen in and breathe out carbon dioxide. Red blood cells pick up freshly inhaled oxygen from the lungs, carry it to the cells and the tissues of the body, and bring back carbon dioxide to be exhaled from the lungs. But because of what they have found now, Professor Stamler and his colleagues argue that the respiratory cycle also includes that 3rd gas, nitric oxide, that controls the release of oxygen from the red blood cells into the tissues that need it, because it opens the blood vessels that allows the oxygen to make it through. And if you don't have that, you run into trouble. Think of it this way. Imagine a snow-covered road and an ambulance carrying a doctor to the hospital to save a patient's life, say at a hospital on the other end of that road. Well, the snow-covered road presents a problem. It's the small blood vessel. It represents a small blood vessel. And say that ambulance is the red blood cell, the hemoglobin we talked about. And the doctor inside that ambulance is the oxygen. So as you can imagine, if the ambulance, the red blood cell, can't push through the snow, the blood vessel, the doctor, i.e. the oxygen, can't make it to the hospital to save the patient. So the ambulance needs some help. It can't get through, perhaps from, let's say, a snowplow. The snowplow could open the roadway so that the ambulance could get through and deliver the doctor in order to save the patient. Well, nitric oxide, of course, as you guessed, is that snowplow. Nitric oxide opens or dilates. You've heard of vasodilation? That's what it does. Vasodilation of the blood vessels. So that red blood cells can deliver their cargo of oxygen to the tissues of the body. Very simple. So, dilating small blood vessels is especially important. Now, this is something I learned that was opposite to what I would have thought. I would have thought the big blood vessels going to your heart are most important. I mean, that's where we put stents in when people have problems. That's where we see the collection of cholesterol and all the other problems that cause folks problems with their blood flow. But Dr. Stamler's research found that without sufficient nitric oxide, even a small drop in oxygen supply in small blood vessels can trigger heart attacks and heart failure from the small vessels. So it's not just how much oxygen you have in your blood. It's a matter of whether the oxygen can get to its intended destination. And nitric oxide is the key to that delivery, especially in the small blood vessels. Well, the large ones as well, but the small ones are especially important. In fact, Dr. Stamler says that vasodilation, that I explained was the relaxation of the blood vessels that opens the blood vessels. You've heard of vasodilation and vasoconstriction. Well, that vasodilation of the blood vessels is important for good blood flow, and it's actually essential for sustaining life, as he puts it. The same principle applies to nutrient absorption. It's often said that you are what you eat, which is true in concept, but that is only true if the body is properly absorbing the nutrients. Because if you're not absorbing nutrients, you're not reaping the benefits of those good food choices, no matter how good those are. And those good food choices are also the key to getting enough nitric oxide to deliver those nutrients to your cells. It's all a big puzzle that's really quite simple. Everything about your good health boils down to what you eat. It really is true. Now, as you may have guessed by now, the foods that provide the most nutrients are also the same foods that have the best antioxidant levels and have the highest concentration of nitrates that we talked about, which promote the body's production of nitric oxide. Remember, the nitrates mix with the bacteria on your tongue to make nitrite, gets to your stomach acid, boom, nitric oxide. They fight inflammation in the body through antioxidant action while simultaneously opening the blood vessels through the production of nitric oxide, that third magical, beautiful gas, which reduces blood pressure, fights inflammation, and delivers the oxygen to the body where it needs it so that you can live a long and happy life. So let's go back to Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn's recommendation of boiling or steaming those greens. Exactly which greens are we talking about here? Because we could be talking about several things, but which one is best? Well, the dark leafy greens that you see in the grocery store all the time are the ones that are the best. There's no guesswork. You don't have to go to a special market. They are bok choy, which is found practically everywhere now, Swiss chard, kale, which is actually the most nutrient-dense food on the planet, and it is one of the cheapest foods on the planet, so take advantage of kale. Collard greens are also in that list. Mustard greens, turnip greens, beet greens. Yes, the leaves coming off of the top of the beets are very good for you. Napa cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cilantro, spinach, arugula, and asparagus. Even asparagus is in that list. Now, here are the best of the best. The top 5 greens rich in nitrates. Number 5 is the beet greens. Number 4 is kale. As I said, it has more nutrients per calorie than almost anything on the earth. The only thing that has more is what's in the water, seaweed. But as we found out recently with all kinds of problems with the oceans, getting something on land is probably better for you. Spinach is number 3. Number 2 is Swiss chard, and at number 1 is that very unique tasting green, arugula. How about that? There are your top 5. Now, as we mentioned earlier, having these foods multiple times per day, as Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn recommended, and chewing them, getting them to mix with the anaerobic bacteria on your tongue, not blending them in a smoothie, just chewing them, breaking them open with your mouth. That is the key. The action of chewing the nitrates in the greens mixes with the bacteria on your tongue. For review here, that converts to the nitrate to nitrite, which the gastric acid in your stomach converts to nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide doesn't just open the blood vessels to help oxygen make its way to our tissues. It also helps the body's systems to communicate. How does it do that? This is also very interesting. A recent study in 2019, the first of its kind, just last year, revealed that the bacteria that digest the food in our gut also tell our DNA what to do. And the communication line they use is, guess what? Nitric oxide. How does that work? Well, gut bacteria tap into the body's supply of nitric oxide. So how do you get more nitric oxide? Remember, you've got to eat the good foods, chew them up. That's how you get more nitric oxide. If you don't have those foods, you're not going to get that nitric oxide. It doesn't just live in our bodies. You've got to put it in through the food. The gut bacteria then releases the nitric oxide in a very carefully regulated manner, almost like a propane cylinder regulator. Now, once released, the nitric oxide attaches to proteins, and that's where the magic happens. Now, disruptions in this process are widely implicated in a lot of the diseases we don't want to get. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, asthma, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. All of these are complications that have ties to poor blood flow and degeneration of the blood vessels. And as you may recall, blood vessel damage and degeneration happens when the life jacket, as Dr. Esselstyn calls it, of the blood vessels, that 1 cell thick endothelial lining, when that's damaged, that's a problem. And when the endothelial cells are damaged, they cannot produce the nitric oxide. That's where the nitric oxide comes from. That opens the blood vessels to carry oxygen necessary for every tissue in the body to survive, and apparently Nitric oxide is even the communication tool that tells your DNA what to do. You're seeing a pattern here? When we see diseases like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, asthma, and even Alzheimer's, ADHD, all kinds of brain problems, including Parkinson's as well, there's a common denominator here at the cellular level. It's nitric oxide, not opening the blood vessels to allow the blood to go through and provide the oxygen to the parts of the body that need it, especially the brain. And this is where all the behavior problems even come from. So hopefully by now, you're realizing the importance of protecting those endothelial cells, that delicate one-cell lining in your blood vessels, so that they can produce the necessary nitric oxide for your entire body to get what it needs, especially your brain, and for different parts of the body to communicate with each other. Very interesting stuff here. Obviously, the foods we've mentioned are key to producing enough nitric oxide. But remember, the endothelial cells cannot produce nitric oxide if they are what? If they're damaged. So are there foods we should avoid in addition to those ones that are good for us? Well, foods that damage the endothelial cells and prevent them from producing nitric oxide, do they exist? Yes, they do. And the number one troublemaker is, well, you might guess, well, let me see, you always talk about animal-based foods and things like this and fried foods. Well, kind of, but I'll bet you'll never guess this. The number one troublemaker is oil. Even something as seemingly heart-healthy as olive oil. In 2011, Dr. Robert Vogel at the University of Maryland reported in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology that olive oil, yes, olive oil, the stuff that's supposed to be good for you, was found to reduce blood flow, not reduce blood pressure, but reduce blood flow in arteries by 31% after consumption. It was also found that olive oil, quote, in his words, causes significant damage to the endothelial cells. That's exactly what we don't want to do, guys. So from what you've learned already in this presentation, you can see how the reduction in blood flow and damage to the endothelial cells are linked. But are you surprised to find out that something as innocent as olive oil could be the problem? I was. A lot of people are. In fact, there's a lot of debate about this. But regardless of the debate, Dr. Vogel is not alone. He's not the only one to point this out, because guess who? Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn has been pointing out the problem of olive oil, all oil, for years. When helping people to reverse heart disease, like he did with former President Bill Clinton, he is adamant about flooding the body with nitric oxide producing foods, like those greens we talked about, and avoiding any oil like the plague. In fact, when patients observing his heart attack proof diet, as he calls it, go to a restaurant, he actually advises them to tell the waiter that they are deathly allergic to even a drop of any kind of oil. But what about oil and vinegar salad dressing? I mean, isn't that supposed to be good for you? Well, it's supposed to be, but guess what? There was a study that showed that women who ate their salads with oil and vinegar dressing had half the number of fatal heart attacks compared to women who did not use an oil and vinegar salad dressing. Well, that sounds good, right? At first, it was thought that the omega-3 fatty acids, which we hear a lot about, which are very beneficial, they live in the oil. Well, we thought that they should be getting the credit for this good result in this study. But when the same type of oil was used in creamy types of salad dressing, you'd think that the oil would have the same effect, because oil is oil, regardless of how you get it in, whether it's through the vinegar and oil or through a creamy type of salad dressing. But guess what? Nothing happened with the creamy type of salad dressing. So let's go back to that oil and vinegar salad dressing. Could it be the vinegar doing the trick? And it wasn't the oil after all. As it turns out, that's exactly what happened. So wait a second. It's the vinegar? Yes, vinegar enhances arterial function. How does it do that? It does it by allowing our arteries to better dilate naturally, just like the nitric oxide does to the endothelial cells. And it does that by boosting the activity of the enzyme in our body that produces the nitric oxide. Vinegar is linked to the production of nitric oxide. In fact, Another study showed that any fruit or vegetable high in nitrates that we talked about, like beets and even grapes, provide protection by negating the effects that high-fat foods have on our arteries. So if you eat them together, will one cancel out the other? In theory, yes. Not a good practice, but that's essentially what we're saying here. As the high-fat foods attempt to cripple your artery function, the high nitrate foods, what do? They feed the endothelial cells, which produce nitric oxide, and that helps the body to create more nitric oxide to push open those blood vessels. So, how often do you really need to eat nitrate-rich whole foods to keep a constant supply of nitric oxide flowing in your bloodstream? To keep that oxygen moving along? I mean, is it once a week? Is it once a day? What are you supposed to do here? Well, nitric oxide is an unstable molecule, and that degrades quickly in the bloodstream. So that means it must be constantly replenished. It's kind of like having water-soluble vitamins. We have to have these every day. There are oil-soluble vitamins as well. Those ones are stored in your liver for later, so you don't need those every day. So the nitrate-rich foods are kind of like those water-soluble vitamins. You have to keep bringing them in order to have a supply of them. Now, one way to increase its stability and limit its breakdown of nitric oxide is to consume foods rich in antioxidants, because antioxidants are molecules that neutralize free radicals. Well, what does that have to do with the endothelial lining and the nitric oxide? Well, a free radical is a molecule that lacks an electron, as you see in the diagram here. And that makes it unstable and damaging to the body as it hunts for an electron to rob from another molecule. And it does that in order to regain its own stability. And you see that in the red diagram here. That's the molecule that is lacking an electron. So every time a molecule is robbed of an electron, it causes cellular damage. Now, alternatively, the antioxidants here, shown in the green, in raw fruits and vegetables, help to stop this process. Every antioxidant contains an extra electron in its molecular structure, with the express purpose of donating that extra electron to a free radical molecule in order to stabilize it, thereby stopping its damaging behavior so it doesn't have to rob from another electron that doesn't have, or another molecule that doesn't have an extra electron like the antioxidant does. Free radicals, because of their destructive nature, can shorten the life of nitric oxide, which is why we need to consume the antioxidants. You see the connection here. So how do you consume vegetables that are high in nitrates and vegetables that are high in antioxidants? You see, I'm focusing on vegetables here, and there's a reason for that. Here again, our creator is way ahead of us. The vegetables that are high in nitrates are also inherently high in antioxidants. How about that? So, is there anything you should avoid in addition to those foods that are obviously not in the healthy category, not in oil, as we learned about, that we don't want either, in order to keep those endothelial cells healthy and to keep the nitric oxide flowing? Well, yes, there is. There's one thing we need to avoid, and I'll bet you haven't even thought of it. I didn't realize it until I did the research. Mouthwash. Get that, mouthwash. Remember what we said about your body's ability to communicate between nitric oxide and the bacteria in your gut? Well, guess what? Mouthwash is designed to what? It's designed to kill germs, which include bacteria, all kinds of bacteria, including those in your mouth. I mean, that's what mouthwash is for, right? Kill the germs, have good breath. Well, you see, there are special bacteria in the mouth that convert the nitrate in the food that you chew. That's why we're supposed to chew. Remember the anaerobic bacteria that combines with the nitrates to make nitrite? That makes nitric oxide? Well, in fact, we cannot produce nitric oxide from the nitrates without those bacteria in our mouth. So, you guessed it, just one good swish of that bacteria-killing mouthwash can kill nitric oxide production in your body for a whole 12 hours. That's essentially the whole part of your day where you might get some of these nitrate-rich foods. You're not going to be doing any good for your endothelial cells because you've taken that mouthwash and you've killed any effect to create nitric oxide for the whole day. Now that can lead to what? Well, guess what? All the things we've talked about. High blood pressure, because why? as you have learned today, nitric oxide is what our body needs to open our blood vessels and release that pressure. So without nitric oxide, the opposite happens. The blood vessels stay narrow. That increases the pressure, just like squeezing on a garden hose. It's not a good scene. So we've talked about mouthwash, nitric oxide, oil, all these interconnections. We talked about diabetes. We talked about mouthwash. Is there a connection there? Guess what? Nitric oxide also regulates the production of insulin. Does that mean that mouthwash contributes to diabetes? Come on, that's ridiculous. Well, at least one study has found that people who used mouthwash twice a day were 65% more to develop diabetes if they're on that edge than those who never used mouthwash. Isn't that amazing? So let's recap here. To keep your blood flowing and to get oxygen where it's needed, you need a constant flow of nitric oxide. That means eat your vegetables, especially those rich in nitrates that we've already mentioned. You need to avoid fatty foods, including the oils. Don't use mouthwash. And one more thing, you get it, you guessed it, get some exercise. Exercise keeps your endothelial cells and blood vessels healthy by increasing your body's natural ability to produce that nitric oxide, just like the nitrate-rich foods do. That should be pretty obvious. So, in the end, all the complicated research about nitric oxide production, vasodilation, the endothelial cells, and even the fascinating relationship between bacteria and DNA, that one blew my mind. All of it boils down to one thing. Your life is literally in your blood, and more specifically, healthy blood flow, the circulation. It all means that you need to keep yourself in optimal health, and that is to eat the foods from our Creator, the foods from the ground, and to keep our bodies moving as we were intended to do.
Hi. Okay, so there's a couple things we need to clear up in this thing. So you're thinking, wait a second, I thought Laird Wellness told me to do like butter in my coffee and stuff like this. Yes, there's several ways to heal. So one of the ways to heal that still works, because we saw it happen at the Hallelujah Diet all the time, that was, doing a vegan diet and avoiding all oils altogether, like Dr. Esselstyn says. That's one way of doing it. Now, that's when you afford yourselves doing lots of carbohydrates. So it seems like when you combine the two, then there's an issue, right? Which is the whole reason a lot of people have high insulin. So now there's other ways to heal. So if you take out all the refined carbohydrates and all of the carbohydrates that are starchy and all that kind of thing, if they just do the greens, when I said greens, I was not saying grains, it's greens, the color green, okay? Right. So the greens. So lots of green vegetables, and you do fats, but you avoid the simple carbs like the breads and the pastas and the oatmeal and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Okay, now that's also a way to heal. So there's more than one way to skin a cat, if you will. So there's more than one way to get healthy. And so there's two different ways to get healthy. We just wanted to make sure you knew that, because I did this presentation before we learned a lot about good fats.
Right.
So what I said in that presentation is true, but when they did the research on the folks who were doing the olive oil, and the reason they should avoid it is because they never looked at what carbs they were doing. So they just said, well, avoid all oils and you'll be okay. Yeah, if you're doing a lot of carbs, because if you combine the two, that's a problem.
Yeah,
but if you
that's
separate
dangerous.
them, right. But now here's at the same time, doing an all vegan diet with no fats at all, very low cholesterol. Our friend Dr. Lewis, who does the blood test for our Biologic Blueprint program, will be the first to tell you that very, very low cholesterol is actually a higher stroke risk. And we've known people who have tried to, quote unquote, look after their diet by going all vegetarian, all vegan, no oils at all, and they had hemorrhagic strokes.
Right.
Because it wasn't what the body needed. So you can't go to extremes on either end. It's the same thing where we were talking in the car today about some people who do this carnivore diet where they're eating nothing but meat.
Meat and water.
Well, come on. If you look at our body's systems, we resemble mostly a herbivore. Our bodies can handle a small amount of meat. So if you keep it to that, and focusing on, like we always say, focus on fat, well, that's the thing that keeps you satiated when there is no meat around, because you're not supposed to be having meat every day, every 3 times a day type of thing. So you got to have it in moderation. So you can see how this works. So that was one thing. Now,
And regarding the olive oil, if you heat it, not so healthy ever.
right? Yep.
If you are going to do olive oil, you make sure you do the first press, the virgin, extra virgin, and you're drizzling it on your salad. You're not
Yep.
heating it.
You're not cooking with it. You want
Yeah.
to cook with like something that has a very high smoke point, like avocado oil.
Butter.
Is fine. And butter. And never really, like, don't cook things to a super high temperature where you're frying stuff. That's
Right.
not good either. So like when you do Thanksgiving coming up here, don't do turkey,
Deep fried turkey
in peanut oil. No, that ain't the way to go.
So you're eating the good meat, but you're deep frying in the peanut oil, changing the molecular structure of the peanut oil,
Yep.
and then making the turkey bad for you.
Exactly. Yeah, not good. Now, regarding the mouthwash. So, we do want to get rid of bad bacteria, but not all bacteria, okay? So, we know that there is bad bacteria in the mouth. We found that quite a lot of our clients who had root canals and maybe even crowns gone wrong will have bacteria that is seeping into their blood system with no way out. And so, yes, in those cases, you want to get rid of the bacteria. But again, mouthwash is not the way to do it, regardless.
Right.
So you want to take the root canal out, and there's different ways you can do it and test for it and that kind of thing, and we can get into that.
We've always heard it to say that bad teeth and root canals and that kind of thing causes heart disease, and we're like, well, how can bad teeth cause heart disease? Well, just think about it logically. When you have cavitations under your root canals or cavitations from teeth pulled, that bacteria builds up in those cavitations.
Right.
And
it's trapped in there.
And your blood flow goes through those teeth and goes through your heart and everywhere throughout your whole body and just keeps circulating. So the bacteria in your mouth that is caused by those abscesses that you don't even know you have because they're hidden underneath will go through your heart system.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fact that the tooth is dead, too. I said to somebody earlier today, it's kind of like, remember that movie Weekend at Bernie's? And Bernie had died, and they tried to hide the fact that Bernie had died, and they were carrying around this dead body everywhere, and it's this comedy movie. That's what your root canal is like. It's like carrying around Bernie in your mouth. It's a dead thing in your mouth. It doesn't belong there. And of course, what do dead things do? They decay. They cause bad stuff. So bacteria. So you don't want to have that in your mouth. So anyway.
And we know there's a great test out there, oral DNA tests. And if you're interested, if you have some root canals, want to do something about that, give us a call because we can certainly point you in the right direction. I work with Dr. Lewis in the daytime, and we have an excellent test to find out if you have some high bacteria in your mouth that is causing issues through your whole body.
Absolutely. So if you're interested in any of this, if you want to learn more from us, if you want to just learn what's going on in your blood, or you just want to see if there's a program out there that can help you because you're not sure where to turn, that's what this thing is at the bottom of the screen for you. That's what it's for. We have a free 30-minute consultation for our Biologic Blueprint program. So this is where you can call us, tell us all what's going on in your life. We have a specific set of questions to make sure we get all the right information for you and figure out if it's a good candidate to help you. And we've helped over 40 people now. Get rid of all kinds of things like their drugs. We've helped people get over acne, weight issues. We had several people lose 40, 50 pounds or more. Anxiety, depression. People have come off their medications. They're living a healthier lifestyle. And they're able to do it on their own because that's the whole point. We train you for a few weeks and then we set you out on your own. And by that point, you know what you're doing.
Right.
We teach you all the tricks of the trade, how to shop, what makes a good healthy fat. All of these types of things that you don't know because there's just so much conflicting information out there.
Right.
Like even tonight, right? We had to explain what we said in the presentation because there's more than one way to get healthy. So, which way works, which way doesn't? Maybe they both work, but you got to be very careful about how you do them. So we can explain all that to you too. So we have all of this knowledge for you. We've been doing this for many, many years. So we'd love to help you out. And you know what? The first call is free because we don't want to rope you into a system if it isn't right for you. So let's find out free. So call us for 30 minutes. We'll find out. And that is our Biologic Blueprint program. Yeah. And for those of you who have done it and you're watching tonight, why don't you write in the comments what you thought of it and tell other folks. And speaking of which, if you like this program, and even if you haven't even done the program before, so if you like the sound of this and you think, gosh, I want to tell my relative about this, all you have to do is tell your relative that when they call us or whoever it is, and they make an appointment, if they decide to sign on with the program, we'll give you a thank you. We'll give you a thank you gift for doing that. And by thank you gift, we mean cash. Okay, so that we just want to thank you. We make a big point of giving 20% net back of what we get from when folks sign up with us. We want to give that back to you to say thank you for bringing someone our way. And
Yep,
that goes for whether you've had the program or never done the program.
Yeah, it's our partnership program, and if
Yep.
you listen to us and you enjoy what you hear, and you send anybody our way, yep, we're going to thank you with some cash back.
All right. So thanks for watching, and we will see you next week on Laird Wellness Live. Have a good week.
Take care.